The first one is that if a broker has a designated officer for their company who is not in ownership of the company, that company will have to have at least $1 million in errors and omissions insurance. Now, what does that mean? When we try to throw the lasso around? If I'm in Texarkana and I say, send me $150 and I'll be your broker, don't give my name out to anybody or my phone number, and don't ever call me because I'm not going to help you do anything. And we'll create this little company and I'll make you the designated officer of that company, but you will have no ownership interest in it. Then that company will have to have E&O. I think we're headed towards a path, and TAR is working on this, about trying to throw a lasso around everybody having E&O. But currently, if somebody gets a real estate salesperson's license, and they never sell anything, and they take a bunch of classes in 2 years, and they sit for the broker's test to be a broker. That's it. We're changing 2 to 6 if this passes. And there's a bunch of other rules. We're going to prohibit anyone from reapplying for a real estate license within 5 years of a conviction, a plea, a revocation, or a surrender of their license. 3 times you take the test, you don't pass, you have to take some more education before you take it again. Establish a 6-hour mandatory broker responsibility class for all brokers and people who oversee the day-to-day activities of licensees for their license renewal. You like that? 6 hours. The Education Task Force, which we have some people here who served on it, also is making a proposal that the Real Estate Commission create an Education Curriculum Standards Committee. And I think we see that sort of as a broker-lawyer committee for education, where you have maybe some educators and some brokers who would review all the curriculum that is being taught in our MCE classes. A lot of other proposals in this legislative agenda. I hope you'll take the time to read them and make some comments. And I think now we're going to look at some contract forms, if you will help me do that. These are posted on the Real Estate Commission's website. They are proposed. What is in blue would be proposed to be added. What is in red would come out. Begin something we need comments on between now and November. So this is pretty not a big deal. You get down here to third-party financing in paragraph 4, if you'd stop right there for a minute. Just kind of making a little better definition of what an underwriting requirement is. It's not just appraisal and insurability and lender repairs, but it's those things for sure. And it also talks about this language was a little different in the contract before, but it's an attempt to make it a little more clear. You see what this red is coming out, what is blue is proposed to go in. And for those of you who can't read it, it currently says, buyer can terminate, this contract will terminate and the earnest will be refunded if the property doesn't, if all this doesn't happen. And it says buyer may terminate this contract by giving notice to seller prior to closing, and the earnest money will be refunded to the buyer. And of course we all know that doesn't happen automatically, but whatever. One of the changes that's being proposed in some places but not in others is to change the word financing approval to credit approval. And I want y'all to think about whether you like that or not. You know, there's two, when a buyer is getting a loan to buy a house, there's two parts of getting a loan. There's the buyer, whether the buyer's worthy and whether the property's worthy. And for a long time we called the buyer being worthy financing approval. And so the proposal is to call it credit approval. I want y'all to think about that. This language is just being moved and underlined. And for those of you who have served in forms committees, you know when you underline it and move it, that means you really mean it now, because you didn't mean it before. This is the one about if you're saying you're going to use an old survey, and you don't get the old survey or the affidavit, and of course the word affidavit means that it has been notarized, so it has to have been notarized. If either one of those things don't happen, then the buyer can get a new survey. And all you have to have is one of your agents have to buy one of these surveys because they didn't get that affidavit notarized and get it to the buyer within that time frame, and you pretty much don't have to worry about anybody else office making that mistake again. And then we've added, they've added a proposal in the Woodward family about no survey being required. And I can also kind of argue both sides of that. Some of you may like it, some of you may not. I can go down both paths on that. Paragraph 7D. Oh my Lord, how many times have we had to answer this, Idra? And you guys may not have this happen, but people in our market check 72 and they write things like, anything on the inspection. Whatever we feel like asking for. So it's going to potentially, if it happens in parentheses after that, say, do not insert general phrases such as subject to inspections that do not identify specific repairs. Okay, and here's the other one where people, I love this part. Adrian, I don't know if you do, but you know, this whole thing about D having a checkbox under 1 and 2, and I know everybody here remembers this, but 1 was in the body of this before. You know, so when you didn't check anything, you were taking it as is. But everybody suddenly, there's a checkbox in front of it, so they've read it. And they go, oh my God, I'm taking it as is, what are you talking about? Well, then what's being added, because we aren't smart enough to read, notice to buyer and seller, buyer's agreement to accept the property in its present condition under paragraph 71 or 2 does not preclude buyer from inspecting the property under paragraph 7A, from negotiating repairs or treatments in a subsequent amendment, or from terminating this contract during the option period, if any. That's because y'all are tired of explaining it. Lots of changes around about trying to be in compliance with the new 2010 HUD that we'll see here in a minute, but some of that's above. And paragraph 9, subpart B5, if you've ever sold any duplexes or rental property, you know that there's always a little question about what happens with the security deposit, and there are 2 ways to see that, and I'm sure you've all read the property code, you know about that, but the proposal is to add this. If the property is subject to a lease, seller shall deliver to the buyer the lease or leases and the move-in condition form signed by the tenant, if any, and transfer security deposits, if any, to buyer. In such an event, buyer shall deliver to the tenant a signed statement acknowledging that the buyer has received the security deposit and is responsible for the return of the security deposit, and specifying the exact dollar amount of the security deposit. So if you sell rental property like that.